Let me tell you a story that begins with a song and ends with silence. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Back in 2003, Sean Paul was everywhere. His voice dominated the Billboard charts, his tracks shook every club. And then came Baby Boy, a collaboration with Beyoncé that wasn't just another hit. It was a cultural moment. Sexy, addictive, radio perfect. It felt like two stars leveling up together. But behind the hype, something colder was happening. Something that, to this day, has people asking if Sean Paul was quietly sabotaged by none other than JayZ. The rumors didn't creep in, they exploded. Fans and tabloids began whispering about a possible spark between Sean and Beyoncé. The steamy music video only fueled the fire. For most people, it was just excitement. But for one man, JayZ, maybe it felt a little too close for comfort. According to Sean Paul, things got uncomfortable fast. He wasn't just battling gossip, he was being pushed out of his own song. Despite Baby Boy becoming a massive chart-topping single, the two rarely performed it together. Not because they didn't want to, but because every time they tried, something mysteriously went wrong. First came the MIC incident. Sean hit the stage, the crowd roared, then silence. His microphone was dead. His band swore it wasn't a glitch. Someone had cut him off mid-performance. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. Then came the fire stage debacle. During an MTV performance in Scotland, everything had been rehearsed, the marks, the flames, the choreography. But when it was Sean's turn to sing, the track skipped right over his verse as if he didn't exist. Backstage, Beyoncé confronted him directly. She told him the rumors could damage her career and demanded to know what was going on. Sean insisted he had nothing to do with the gossip, but that conversation left a crack in their partnership. The final blow came at the VMAs. Sean was told he'd be contacted for rehearsal. The call never came. Instead, he sat in the audience and watched Beyoncé perform Baby Boy alone while his vocals played over the speakers. No warning. No explanation. Just humiliation. And he couldn't even protest. The moment he did, the narrative would flip, he'd be painted as bitter, jealous, or messy. So he swallowed it. For years. Until finally, when he did open up, it was clear that wound had never healed. JayZ never admitted to being involved, but Sean had his suspicions. Especially when Jay later dropped a track with the line, "Run up on me at the light, you will lose your life, need a light." Sean couldn't ignore the jab, after all, his breakout hit was "Gimme the Light." Coincidence? Maybe. But when you stack that lyric on top of the MIC cuts, the skipped verses, the VMA snub, it starts to feel less like bad luck, and more like a warning. Sean Paul didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He built his career on grind, charisma, and a sound that blended dancehall and pop like no one else. Baby Boy should have been a crowning achievement, a moment to celebrate. Instead, it marked the start of an unspoken blacklist. Doors began to close. Invitations dried up. And the whispers about JayZ's jealousy only grew louder. During the filming of the Check On It music video, JayZ reportedly cleared the entire set. Not because of a security threat, but because he didn't want other men watching Beyoncé dance. He wasn't even there in person, he just heard about the male presence on set, made a call, and within minutes the room was empty. Beyoncé later had to apologize, explaining that Jay was simply uncomfortable. That wasn't an isolated incident. That was control. And it raises the question, was Sean Paul just one of many? Some insiders claim Usher was reduced to nothing more than a background dancer in the Naughty Girl video instead of being credited as a featured artist, all because Jay didn't want his name too close to Beyoncé's. Others point out that male collaborations slowly started disappearing from her projects altogether. Beyoncé became more and more of a solo force. Undeniably talented, yes, but noticeably surrounded by fewer male artists. Think about it, for a superstar of her caliber, her list of male collaborations is surprisingly short. Maybe that's by design. For Sean Paul, though, the fallout wasn't just professional, it was personal. He later admitted that after Baby Boy, he felt like he couldn't even mention Beyoncé's name in interviews without catching side eyes or pushback from powerful circles. He never directly accused JayZ, but his tone said enough, someone was pulling strings. Someone powerful. And the numbers don't lie. Baby Boy was a global smash, yet Sean and Beyoncé only performed it together 3 times. That alone speaks volumes. Years later, in an interview with the Daily Beat, Sean finally broke his silence. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't messy. He was simply honest. He explained that he barely spent any time with Beyoncé during the recording process. They didn't hang out, they weren't close, it was strictly professional. But still, the rumors spread like wildfire. The chemistry on screen was enough to fuel endless speculation. And in the music world, perception can become reality in an instant. Sean admitted he never knew how the gossip started, but once it did, it spiraled out of his control. And worse, the sabotage felt inescapable. When your mic is cut live on stage, there's no recovery. When your verse is skipped during a televised performance, you can't fix it afterward. When you're promised rehearsal details, only to be iced out at the last minute, what can you do? Complain. Not without being branded bitter. Not without risking your entire career. Not without risking your reputation. That was the unspoken rule. The message became clear: step out of line, even unintentionally, and you'd be erased. Not in some loud, obvious way. Not with statements or headlines. But slowly, subtly, quietly. The kind of erasure you can't prove, but you feel. And maybe that's the scariest kind of all. Because when someone like Sean Paul starts questioning whether he's being targeted, you realize just how deep the control might run. JayZ has always played chess, not checkers. In business, in music, in relationships, he's known for thinking 5 moves ahead. So when people began piecing it together, Beyoncé's shrinking list of male collaborations, Sean Paul's quiet disappearance, Usher being pushed to the background, it wasn't hard to imagine Jay pulling strings behind the curtain. Not out of open malice, but with a ruthless instinct to protect what he saw as his empire, his image, his woman. And maybe it wasn't just jealousy. Maybe it was about power. Beyoncé's star was rising faster than anyone's, and anything that could blur her brand with another man's became a threat. In Jay's world, threats don't get warnings. They get erased, strategically, silently. And if the rumors about Jay's own infidelities held any truth, then maybe this was projection as much as protection. Maybe he knew what men were capable of, because he was that man. He saw his own shadow in Sean Paul, and that's what made him flinch. Sean, for his part, never went nuclear. He never dropped names or waived receipts. He stayed humble, letting the music speak for him. But if you listened closely, especially in the interviews years later, you could hear it in his voice, that experience left a scar. Stung. This wasn't just a bad business move. This was personal. A song that should have been a milestone ended up becoming a black mark, one that followed him for years, shaping how others saw him without ever knowing what really happened behind the scenes. But time has a funny way of exposing what silence tries to bury. Fans started revisiting old interviews, live performances, and accounts from people close to the power couple. And slowly, patterns began to emerge. JayZ wasn't just protective. He was strategic. Whispers swirled about him blocking access, screening collaborations, even dictating who Beyoncé could share a frame with. Was it insecurity? Ego? A mix of both. Whatever the motive, the fallout was clear. Talented men found themselves locked out, left wondering what invisible line they had crossed. Even now, in an era where nothing escapes online scrutiny, the baby boy situation remains one of the most glaring mysteries of Beyoncé's career. Why did one of her biggest early hits never get the spotlight it deserved? Why did Sean Paul, a global superstar in his own right, end up sidelined? And why, all these years later, does it still feel like no one dares to speak about it openly? Maybe because there's still fear. JayZ isn't just a rapper. He's a mogul, tethered to platforms, partnerships, and legacies that stretch far beyond music. Speaking against him, even indirectly, comes with consequences. And Sean Paul knew that. That's why he kept his words measured. That's why he stayed quiet for years. And when he finally did speak, he wasn't bitter. He didn't beg for sympathy. He simply told his truth. In the end, Baby Boy will always be a hit. But behind that glossy video and those iconic vocals lies a story of power, pride, and paranoia, one where a rising star got caught in the crossfire of a much bigger game. The song still plays. The music still moves crowds. But the silence between those two artists, that says more than any lyric ever could. Because sometimes, what isn't said is louder than what is.